So in today's session, we're going to be covering the key financial reports within ExpensePlus. We're going to focus on three reports in this session. We're going to look at the income and expenditure by fund report. We're going to look at the fund movement summary, and we will explore the balance sheet report as well for those who account on an accruals basis. For each of these, we will aim to cover what each of these key reports are and why they're important, what these reports show, how you can use them, and we've got some hints and tips about utilizing these reports as well. So we're going to start with the income and expenditure by fund report, and we can find all of our finance reports within the sidebar menu. If you scroll down within ExpensePlus to finance reports, this is where you'll see a whole bank of finance reports for you to utilize and to serve your organization as best they can. So our summary by fund within the income and expenditure column is the report that we're looking at first. This report has multiple different views. So if you want to view this report in a monthly way, then you can in this tab. But if you report on a quarterly basis, you can select the quarterly tab here. If you want to look at a specific month in detail, you can also use the monthly view. And if you just need a kind of headline numbers version of this report, there is a totals only version as well. This report shows a breakdown of your income and expenditure across your months, across your quarters, across your financial year, enabling you to track what money is being spent on, what income has been received, and whether a surplus or deficit has been made. You can view this report for your current financial year using this filter, or previous financial years. So you can have a look at what happened in 2024 and get a view of the whole year if you would like to. You also get to choose which fund or funds you want to view this report for. So you can view this report for multiple funds at the same time. So in here, we've got the option to tick multiple funds. We can select all if we want to, and that will allow you to compare your income and expenditure across multiple funds at the same time. One thing to note is that bank transactions will only show in this report once they've been reconciled. So if you have any unreconciled transactions, then these won't be included in this report because obviously you've not assigned them to a fund or category. You've not reconciled them yet. So when you are choosing the date to which you want to see this report, so in the monthly view, we're going to select a date that we want to see this report to. And for this organization, we've not actually reconciled May's transactions yet. So we're going to select the 30th of April. Now, you still may see this reminder here that transactions might be missing from this report. And that's suggesting that there are some transactions within this time period that haven't been reconciled yet. So if you see that, it might be something that you want to go and check out before you dive right into using the report, just to make sure that the information is going to be fully accurate for the point in time that you want it to be, that all your transactions up until, for us, the 30th of April have been reconciled and therefore are included in this report. So this report shows our different categories and how the income or expenditure varies across them in this view over different months. If you've set a budget within ExpensePlus, it will also allow you to compare to that budget. You'll be able to see anticipated income based on the actual income. You'll be able to see the variance between your actual income and your budgeted total. You can see your projected total here, your budget received so far in the financial year, and your total budget that has been set in the categories screen, which we'll have a look at a little bit later in the session. So you're able to view, like I say, the income. This is our income section, and our expenditure is down here for the year to date for our general fund in this case. Here you get to see how you get to break down your income and expenditure effectively how you want with this report, because you have the ability to customize your categories and category types and category groups within this report. So this organization has 4 different categories within the donation, with 4 different donation categories, but your organization might have 10, and that's absolutely fine. This is not a year-end report, so there isn't a standard format that it has to look like. There are other inbuilt reports within ExpensePlus for year end. So this report allows you to break down your income and expenditure however you want using categories and category groups. Now, a note for this report, your categories will show alphabetically within your category group. So you can see this blue line here, these blue lines are our category groups, which we've got donations here. And within that, we've got regular donations, one-off large gifts, online donations, and Sunday offering. So these 4 categories are going to show alphabetically within this report. And that is a default. Category groups, however, can be ordered alphabetically if you would like them to be, or you can order them by position, which would mirror the order in which you have set your category groups in your category setting screens, and that's fully customizable. You can move your category groups up or down in that screen, which we'll have a look at when we have a look at the category settings screen. So if you would like to customize this page so that you view your category group order by name or position, you get to choose that in here in the customize icon at the top of the report. You can view this report by category group only as well if you would like to. So we've got a few different filtered options at the top of this screen. So we can view by category groups only, and this will scrunch down the report to some headline numbers, which might be good for sharing with members of your team who maybe don't need to see such a detailed breakdown of your income and expenditure, and they're more concerned with the headline numbers. So you can do that by clicking on that tick box there. We've also got the option to round your income and expenditure to whole currency units. Now, you can see that there are pounds and pence available in this report at the moment. If we click this button, those will be rounded and you will see more simple figures. Again, helpful for sharing with those who don't necessarily need the ins and outs, the details of the pounds and pence to the exact digit. And you can also change, so your variance here, we can see your variances by percentage, and we'll explore this and what this means in a little bit, but you can choose to show this as an amount in pounds sterling or the currency that your organization is set in by clicking that tick box instead. So those are your customization filter options within this report. Now, this report is fully drillable. So you don't have to know necessarily the income or expenditure of different categories within your organization off the top of your head. This is really useful if you're potentially in a meeting and you want to explore exactly what makes up some of these numbers. You want to explore exactly what makes up these donations in April 2026. You can click into that month and it will give us a detailed breakdown of all the donations that have been reconciled into this category. You can also click further. You can drill further in and view that exact transaction. So you can view this named donation. You can view when it was reconciled, when it came in, who it's from. All of that detail is available through this report, which makes this report really interactive and live and helpful for you in real time. This is another advantage to adding your team and all of those who need access to this report as a user in Expense Plus, because you can actually give your users access to reports like this, give them permission if they need it to drill down into these reports, and they can view that information for themselves rather than having to ask maybe you or coming to a key person within your organization to ask questions about where that donation came from or when it came in or who it's from. You can actually give those users who need that access the ability to drill into this report for themselves. Granting users access is customizable, so you can give them the right level of access that they need, but also access to the right funds and categories. So it's not an all or nothing kind of report. It's not an all or nothing permission. You can give your users customized access to this report. Just a note on what I said about selecting multiple funds. Now, you can, of course, select all funds within this report and view your income and expenditure across all of your funds in your organization. What this is going to do, though, is going to give you a very long list of income categories and a very long list, probably even longer list, of expenditure categories. This isn't necessarily the most efficient way to have a look at your income and expenditure across your entire organization. So if this is something that you are interested in doing, if you want to have a look at that level of detail across your whole organization, we would recommend checking out the category connectors features feature within Expense Plus to get more information on efficiently exploring income and expenditure across multiple funds. We have multiple great help guide articles on category connectors within our help guide, but we also explore this feature in another Lunch and Learn session titled Advanced Financial Reporting. So do check that out if that is of interest to you. Let's take this back to viewing just the general fund so that we don't have such a long list of categories and lots of figures. So we mentioned that your budgets are displayed within this report, and the variance in this column here shows you the difference between your budget and your actual income or expenditure. So this is our income. We can see that we are maybe 15% over budget at this point in the year for our regular donations. And then we can scroll down to our expenditure and see there's various different variances across our organization, some of which look healthy and some of which look less healthy. But that is what this report is really good at doing. It helps you drill into different categories and compare to your budget. So that variance is really helpful for you to kind of look at what is going to plan and what is exceeding those plans, what is maybe falling short, and therefore we might need to put a plan in place regarding that category or that category group, and really evaluate where our organization is up to at any point in time. Now, as we said, that can be as a percentage or an amount using this filter option here. And Expense Plus can also forward project to the end of your financial year based on this information so far in the financial year. This is done in accordance with how you set your budgets, and we'll explore the different options for that in a second. But this option here allows you to project forward based on not just your budget, but the information or the data that has come in already within the financial year. Now, as with most reports within Expense Plus, this income and expenditure summary is downloadable as a PDF or a CSV. Obviously, if you download it as a PDF, that is an uneditable document. But if you download it as a CSV, you'll be able to kind of filter that report using an application like Excel, and that is up to you. So that's another good feature of this report. So let's look at setting budgets. Firstly, why is setting budgets important? Budgeting is a really sensible and helpful financial practice that allows you to plan spending and drive income where required. And in Expense Plus, it also allows you to compare that plan that you've made throughout the financial year, projecting for where you are over or under budget, as we've seen with this projected total column in the income and expenditure summary report. So we could take a look at those settings then. We're going to go into our settings, which is this cog icon at the top right. We can then go into our categories, and we are going to show that there are, multiple financial years within this organization. So you can look at your categories across financial years. The really good thing about this is that you can copy your category setup into the next financial year when it's time to. You can see this button here that will say that setup next year is available in the last 6 months of the current financial year, and that will allow you to copy over your income and expenditure categories by fund if you would like to. But these categories are per financial year, which means that if you copy them over, that's great. You can add some more categories to the next year if you want to, or you can remove any that you're no longer using, and it won't impact those categories within your prior financial year. So it allows you to make sure that everything is set up exactly how you want in each financial year. So for example, if you were setting up a new project, you might want to add new categories for this without changing an existing one into your new category. We would recommend that you remove any categories you're no longer using and add new ones for new projects or wherever they are needed. So you can add categories and category groups from this screen. So if you want to add an income category or income category group, you can click on these icons here, and that will allow you to select the category group that you'd like this category to sit under, as well as the category type. But if you know exactly which category group you want to add this into, you can actually add a category within a category group using this little plus icon to the right of the category group as well. I mentioned that you can view the income and expenditure summary report in whichever order you would like your category groups to be in. And the way you do that is using these little plus and sorry, up and down arrows, not a plus, is it? Up and down arrows, which will allow you to move. So if I click on this down arrow, the donations are going to move under the gift aid category group, and I can move that back up again if I want to. So that's how you can order your category groups, and that will allow you, if you use the by position filter, that will therefore reflect how your category groups are displayed within the income and expenditure report. So let's look at how we set up budgets. Then we go to our budget details, and in here we're able to allocate budgets by funds. So we can't here allocate budgets and view all categories and category groups. We do this by fund just to make things a little bit simpler and easier. And within Expense Plus, there are two ways really to set up your budgets. There are two options for you, and we call these budget profiles. So we've got linear budgets. This is what most of your categories are likely to be set up as, and this is where you enter your total budget in this column, in this box here. And Expense Plus is going to divide that equally by the 12 months in your financial year. Now, if you happen to be in an extended financial year or a reduced financial year, it will obviously not divide that total by 12. It will divide it by the number of months in your financial year to date. The other option, as you can see in our budget profile for one-off large gifts, is custom. This is a great option where you have maybe a one-off project or an event where the income or the expenditure is not going to be linear across your financial year. It's not going to be split across 12 months because actually the income or expenditure is likely to be focused around particular times in the year. So custom allows you to specify this however you want, and that will be reflected in the income and expenditure report. So in this example, we're expecting or budgeting for £4,000 to come in around April and £2,000 around September. That might be because we're doing a particular event where we're looking to ask for one-off large gifts around that time in the year, and that fits with our yearly plan. And as I say, that will be reflected in the income and expenditure report as well. So you'll be able to compare against your plan and what is actually happening in your financial year rather than reporting kind of over or under budget for 8 months of the year. Whereas if this budget was kind of linear and it's split across the year, we're not expecting any income until April, then we're going to be theoretically, or according to Expense Plus, under budget if this was a linear budget by April, because we wouldn't be expecting any income, but it would have split that budget across all 12 months. Now, we also have 3 different ways to project budgets in Expense Plus. So we looked at that projection feature of Expense Plus. It allows you to take information that has already happened within your financial year and project totals to the rest of your financial year. And there are 3 ways that you can ask Expense Plus to do this. So scaled here is really what you're going to have most of the time for most of your categories. This is where Expense Plus will take what has happened to date and forward project that for the rest of the financial year. So for example, if you have an income category that is 5% above what you budgeted, then Expense Plus will take that forward and project a 5% increase relative to your budget that you've entered for each remaining month within the financial year. So for regular donations, that might be what you would like, because you might have had 3,500 come in January and February, and therefore you can confidently project that that will be the case for the months going forward, because you can see that direct debits have been set up to mirror that. Alternatively, you can choose to have this fixed, which, if you just to mention, you can change this within your income category settings screen. So here we can select fixed if we want to, and this is basically for where you know better than Expense Plus, which is fair enough. For example, you might have budgeted £10,000 worth of grants for this year, and in month 1 of the year, you receive that £10,000, and you know that's actually all that you're going to receive. You've got all the grants you applied for, you've got no further applications pending, you're not expecting to send out any more applications for any grants. You don't want this to be scaled because that projection is going to heavily over project what you expect to come in for this financial year. So a fixed projection allows you to tell ExpensePlus basically not to get too excited and just stick with the budget that you have inputted to ExpensePlus within this screen. And then your third option is scaled, is adjusted. Sorry, we've already done scaled. Adjusted, this projection basically adjusts to what has already happened in the year without suggesting that this will happen for every month going forward. So in our example, where we've got £500 over our budgeted income for month one, ExpensePlus will amend your projected total to include that extra 500, but it won't suggest that that extra £500 is going to come in the following 11 months. So it just adjusts your total based on what has actually happened rather than with scaled, where it projects that onto your future months. So those are your options for different projections within ExpensePlus. And if you want to know a little bit more about that, or you have any other interest in budgeting and how to set one and why it's important, we do have a great blog post on our blog site, which I will signpost to at the end of the session. We'll send you the link to that. So it's really helpful blog post written for us there. So let's go back to the income and expenditure summary report and just have a quick chat about, we've kind of looked at the features, we've looked at what this report shows, but how is that helpful? Well, basically this report is going to help you see, does everything look how you want it to look at a moment in time? Can you explain any of these big variances in your budget? And if not, is ExpensePlus highlighting something that you need to therefore investigate? You want to make sure that you've set, like I said, the date correctly with this report in order to see that accurately, because there'll be some transactions that, if there are transactions that have been reconciled, they won't show in this. So that variance might be inaccurate if you haven't reconciled all of your transactions when you view the report. And you're basically going to look at whether your funds and categories are as they should be. Are they up to date? Are there any key areas that are looking a little bit unlike what we would hope them to be? So, for example, a category that has kind of 350% variance on it, that might be really significant. However, if it's a category that only has a budget of £50, that pales into significance against a budget that has only a 20% variance, but has a budget of £12,000. So this allows you to look at not just the variance, but also what the total budget was and how big a variance that is in terms of amount rather than just as a percentage. This report also allows you to check. So we recommend having a category within ExpensePlus that is called something like Z to be recoded. This is really for expenditure. So if we scroll down to our expenditure in our general fund, we can see we've got a category group called Z Other. And in here, we've got transactions to be recoded. This is where we have transactions that we're reconciling, but we actually aren't fully sure where they belong within our category structure. We might need to ask the person who made that purchase to give us a bit more detail. If we've got any transactions still in here, this report is going to show us that and remind us that we've got some transactions we need to actually investigate and reallocate to an actual expenditure category rather than this kind of holding category here. But that is what this report will show you, that which is really helpful as well. It's also a good report for showing you whether you've got or highlighting any areas where you might have income that's come in that is in the wrong fund. So we think about this particularly in our general fund. So in fund accounting, you'll have unrestricted funds like our general fund where money can be spent on anything. You might have restricted funds where money has been given for a particular purpose and can only be spent on that purpose. So you might have something like a building projects fund where people give or a grant is given particularly for a building project. You don't want that money to be sat in the wrong fund. And this report can help highlight that. If you scroll down within your income categories and you see that there's kind of a big spike in one of your income categories that you don't expect, this will allow you to just drill in and check, is that actually the right place for this transaction to be coded to? And if not, we can reallocate it to the correct fund and category that it should be. You can also see within this report, again, any large purchases. So we're going to expenditure this time. if there's any large expenditure that we see in this report. So for example, in our maintenance expenditure, we can see there's £1,000 for February. That looks like one transaction. This is our boiler repair. Now, if this was a new boiler, if it's a boiler repair, do we need to capitalize that asset? If you work on an accruals basis, you might want to record this as a fixed asset. For example, if you had bought a new boiler and it's over the threshold of your organization's capitalization policy, this report allows you to view any large purchases that you might need to reallocate to a fixed asset category rather than an expenditure category. So finally, on this report, a few hints and tips. It's really great that you get to set up your categories however you like. So make sure that you do set up this report, set up your category structure, how it's most going to be useful for you and your organization. Going hand in hand with that, we recommend you keep it simple. People are far more likely to read or look at a finance report that is simple and easy to understand. And remembering that if you do need further detail, you can drill into these reports. You also have a whole suite of donation reports alongside, we're looking at our income categories here, but you've also got within ExpensePlus donation reports that you can view, which are different ways of breaking down your donations. So there's loads more that you can access within ExpensePlus. It doesn't all have to be within your income and expenditure by summary report. And like I said, it's really important to give everybody who needs access to ExpensePlus. We don't charge per user. You can set up everyone in your team that needs access and customize the access that they need to these finance reports. And James will talk us through how we do that a little bit later on. I am now going to hand over to James. He's going to take us through our next report, which is the fund movement summary.
Thank you so much, Jack. So here you can see on my screen the fund movement summary report, and that's accessed in the same way through your report screen. You can access it over here where it says fund movement summary. So this report shows the different funds that you have within your organization and what the balances of these were at the start of the financial year and what the closing balance is at the date that we set. So I'm going to set the date right now to the 30th of April because typically in your organization, you often want to report up to the end of the last period. We've only just tipped into June. And so actually in this case, we're going to report up to the end of April because we haven't quite finished May yet. And so in here as well, you can round just in the same way that you can on lots of the other reports, and you just tick that box just here. You can also change the order if you want. So if you want to order it by fund type, so you can see your unrestricted, designated, and restricted. We'll go into more about those in a minute, but you can do that as well. So funds, really, they are like different pots of money in your organization, and they're ways of splitting income and expenditure for different purposes. So, if you, for example, have people giving donations just to your food bank, then you can create a restricted fund for that. Funds, to note, are not bank accounts. And so you can have one bank account and 30 different funds, and that's absolutely fine. It's a common misconception, but funds and bank accounts are two totally separate things. In your organization, you're likely to have a general fund, and this is unrestricted normally, and it can be spent in any way that meets the aims of your charities. That's usually where most of your income and expenditure will go in and out of. Restricted funds, I've already mentioned briefly, but they are money for a specific purpose. They have a legal restriction and they can only be used for that. So it's important that they're held separately. Could be grants, could be donations, etc. Endowments are a type of restricted fund, but we won't go into that now. And designated funds, they're a type of unrestricted fund, and that's where your organization has chosen to set funds aside for a specific purpose. So in this example here, you've got some reserves which have been set aside, 3 months worth of reserves for your organization in a designated fund. You can find out more about different types of funds, and we'll post a link at the end in the chat to our What is Fund Accounting blog, and it explains more about that in there. So, some important things to note. Don't forget to set the date correctly, as I've already mentioned, but can't emphasize that one enough. And don't forget that if you're working on an accruals basis of accounting, then your fund balances will be made up of more than just cash. And so in accruals, it's going to include things like fixed assets, accounts payable, receivable loans, etc. So this closing balance doesn't tell you everything. To find a breakdown, you'll need your balance sheet, and Jack will show us more about that just a little bit later on. But this figure here, this total funds, that will agree to the bottom of your balance sheet where it says total net assets. Of course, within receipts and payments, this closing total fund balance will agree to the amount of cash in your organization, and it will agree to your bank balances plus petty cash at any given point in time. And so this report is really useful for just getting an overview and a snapshot of your organization's finances. It may be that you wish to provide more detail about perhaps your general fund, and so that was where the income and expenditure summary by fund report comes in that Jack has just spent some time showing us already. And of course, if you were to give that report to your trustees or whoever in your organization is appropriate, the income and expenditure on that report would agree back to this so long as the end date is set to the same. So it would almost be like a little zoom in. That summary by fund report would be a zoom in detail of this. And typically for your other funds, you often don't need that level of detail because it's a very limited number of transactions or and lower amounts. And even the ones where you've got high amounts, often you might have one grant that makes up that whole £8,000. So you could see even from this report what that relates to. And so, an example of where a few examples of where this report might be helpful for you. So, you can see here we've got this youth worker grants fund, and you can see we've been using that to pay for the salary of our youth worker in this organization. But what you can see is that actually the balance is now only £800. And so, it's running a bit low. And this actually, therefore, might highlight to you that perhaps you wish to consider applying for some additional grants, or perhaps you are considering just taking the money in future from your general funds, or perhaps it was a time limited role and that's coming to an end, so it's not actually of importance to you. We can also see here that we've got a fund that's in a negative balance, this building maintenance fund at the bottom. And typically, we don't want funds that are in a negative balance. And so, if that is the case, we would be wanting to see perhaps it might be that we need to take some of the expenditure out of here, move that to our general fund. Oh, it could also be that we know that, in the next month we're receiving a grant for £1,000, and in which case it's not going to be negative anymore. It's just a timing issue, and that's okay. But if it went over our year end, that's probably a question we want to be asking. We don't typically want to have funds in a negative balance. And then also we can see here we've got our food bank restricted fund, and the balance of that is very high. And so it might be the case that perhaps some expenditure that should have been put to our food bank fund has in fact been put into the general fund, and we need to find that and move it out, because typically we'd spend from the restricted fund first, and then once that's used up, we would then spend from the general funds. And of course, within charity accounting, what we don't want to be doing is holding large pots of restricted money in the bank, because whilst it can only be spent on a restricted purpose, it's been given in order that it gets spent on that purpose. It hasn't been given to sit in the bank. And so, therefore, whilst we don't just spend it for the sake of it, we should be looking at ways that we can invest that money in that work within our organization. And these are questions that perhaps your trustees or whoever is responsible for your organization should be looking at from time to time. So, a few questions you might like to ask before I finish and then hand over to Jack for the balance sheet is, do you have funds that you need to allocate money to in order to use up. So I've already mentioned the example there of the food bank. Is it that there's some money somewhere else? Do you have restricted pots that once used up, your general fund is going to cover? So again, that might be something like the youth worker fund. Um, is expenditure heavily outweighing income, and therefore the fund balance is going to be used up ASAP? And again, that's a little health check that we might need to look into. Um, and this all helps us to begin to ask the right questions, like I've already mentioned, can we apply for the grant? Or do we have money in other funds to cover this? So that's all from me. I will hand back to Jack.
Thanks, James. That's really helpful. And like we said, these reports are helping you kind of ask the right questions and therefore plan ahead for what is going on within your organization, within your funds. And so we're going to have a look at the balance sheet. Now, the reason the balance sheet exists is for those who account on an accruals basis, because your funds are not just made up of cash. So if you account on a receipts and payments basis, then what we have just been through with James, the fund movement summary, will show you kind of your accurate fund totals, because your funds are cash balances. That's all that you have making up your fund balances. However, if you operate on an accruals basis, you might have other things like fixed assets, and loans, or plenty of other things that we'll get into in a moment. Now, that's not to say that those who account on a receipts and payments basis don't have this. Those who do account on a receipts and payments basis will be able to declare at year end any assets and liabilities through the assets and liabilities statements. So that might be a loan or fixed assets. And you can learn more about this within our year end receipts and payments lunch and learn session available on our training page. So please do sign up for that if that is of interest to you. So if you account on a receipts and payments basis, you won't see this balance sheet report. So bear with us while we zoom through what this report is for those on an accruals basis. So your balance sheet is going to show you loads of different information if you account on an accruals basis. And there's several views for this report. You can view this on date to a particular date that you get to set in your filter here. You can view this report monthly, which will give you a breakdown by month of where your funds are at and what your balance sheet is looking like across your assets and liabilities. You can view it by fund, which shows you your totals, but broken down by fund instead across your different assets and liabilities. And you can also view this by fund type, which allows you to break it down basically by restricted or unrestricted funds types. If you're wondering why designated funds aren't shown in here, that's because, as James mentioned earlier, designated funds are a type of unrestricted fund. So within your balance sheet, your designated funds will be treated as unrestricted funds. So let's go back to the on-date version. This is obviously customizable. This is your classic version of the balance sheet where you can view all your funds, or you can select a particular fund in here. Typically, you'll be looking at all funds at once in here. On the monthly view, obviously shows you a breakdown across your financial year. So this is really helpful for looking at trends that are going on throughout a financial year, if there's anything that is changing. So we're looking at our cash balance, and our cash balance is staying fairly steady. That, for this organization, that's great. But however, if this was reducing significantly, that would give us some big questions about what is going on with our cash balance. Are we going to be able to pay for invoices or rent or anything like that? If our cash balance is reducing too much, we might need to investigate that. And so that's what this view of the report is especially helpful in viewing. Obviously, by fund allows you to break down the different assets across your different funds. So in here we can see, we've got in our fixed assets, within our fixed assets, we've got quite a lot in our general fund, which is great. We've got nothing in our building project, but 9,000 in our food bank, and nothing in any of the other funds. It helps us be able to see fund by fund and asset by asset what is going on within our organization. And just to note, the by fund type view, this is your year end view of the balance sheet. So you can see your restricted and unrestricted funds here. And this is something that you will come to look at within your year-end reports as well, but you can look at that at any moment in time that you like to. So let's break down the balance sheet then. We'll focus on the green lines to start with. The green lines are your assets. These add to our fund balance. So those are things that add to our fund balances. We've got cash, we've got accounts receivable. So that's money due in that hasn't been received yet. So you might have submitted a gift aid claim, but that money has not arrived in your bank account yet, something like that. We've got prepayments. This is money that's already been spent kind of in advance. So that might be insurance for the year that you've paid up front, but is still an asset, even though it's no longer cash. It's something that adds to your organization. You've got fixed assets. These are things like buildings, minibuses, laptops. We spoke about capitalizing some of the assets that or purchases that we make as an organization. Then with the red lines, these are your liabilities. These take away from your fund balances. So you've got accounts payable, money that we owe. So that might be a supplier invoice. You've got deferred income. That's money that has been paid to us in advance. So our bank balance has gone up, but we need to know that this is actually for something in the future. So an example of this might be if you hire out your building for a wedding. Someone might have booked it in one financial year and paid for it in that financial year, but actually the wedding itself is not happening until the next financial year. So that would be something you might class as deferred income. In here, you've also got any loans or mortgages to be recorded as well, because these also need to be subtracted from your fund balances. This report is really helpful to drill down into a fund's balance, because it's all well and good having a fund balance of £1 million in a particular fund. But if 99% of that is locked up in a fixed asset, then you need to ask the question of whether you're going to be able to have enough cash to pay your supplier invoices or to pay any salaries that need to go out this month. The report is also really helpful for keeping track of your cash balance. So that's overall for your entire cash flow, but also specifically for your general fund to ensure that we don't end up with no unrestricted cash, which could put your organization in a slightly tricky position. So like we said, the monthly view allows you to track things month by month and see any trends that are coming, especially with your cash, whether they are fluctuating heavily or on a steady decline, things that we can then address later. And that's what these finance reports do. These finance reports are highlighting things within your organization that you might then need to question or plan for or plan around as you look to the coming months within your financial year. This report is also drillable. So again, as with lots of our finance reports, you can drill into some of these transactions. So we can look at our accounts receivable. We can click in and see that we've got gift aid that has not been received yet within our accounts receivable. And a top tip for this report, it's really helpful to have a separate reserves fund because if you view that reserves fund within your general fund, if we looked at this by fund, and we could see that our general fund is looking pretty healthy with £23,000 in it as cash, but our 3-month reserves that our trustees have set aside of salary costs actually sits within that. That means we don't have £23,000 of unrestricted cash that we're able to spend if some of it is locked up in a designated fund. So obviously designated funds aren't restricted in the same way. They are still an unrestricted fund, but your trustees would need to evaluate whether they can move that money out back into your general fund. So that's why we would suggest having a reserves fund, even if everybody knows that it's part of the general fund, just so that there is a separate fund within this report allowing you to view an accurate total for the cash within your general unrestricted fund, the money that you can literally spend on anything that goes towards the aims of your organization. I think I'm just checking my notes. That is where we will finish with the balance sheet. I'm going to hand over to James. We're coming into land and he's going to talk to us about how we can set up users with access to these reports and how they can be customized. James, are you happy? Is there anything else you wanted to add about the balance sheet before we go on to that?
No, I shall. We'll move on to the final section with the users. So as Jack said, we're just coming into finish now, and so now is the time to put your questions in the chat to Jack if you've not done that already, and then we will answer those at the end. But as Jack mentioned right near the beginning, within Expense Plus, you can have as many users set up in your user settings as you like. We do not restrict that and we don't charge per additional users. So we would recommend adding every user that needs or every person that needs access to your reports as a user. And there are ways you can customize their access within here. And so if we just take this example user here, Daniel Jenkins, and we have a look, we can set what access he has to the summary by fund report by selecting which funds he has access to, first of all, and then within each fund, selecting which categories he has access to. So if we tick summary level, this will mean that he can see that report in the same view that Jack showed earlier at the very beginning. If we click transactional level, not only will he be able to view that report, but he'll be able to click in and he'll be able to view all the individual transactions. So if you don't want him to be able to do that, you can just leave it at summary view. And that might be a good option for a lot of your people in your organization who are not members of the finance team. And the same applies to expenditure. Note you've got this extra column, and that just relates to whether somebody can submit a purchase against this category. It's nothing to do with the reporting level. So that's how you would give access to the different levels of summary by fund report within your organization. You must then click set once you've done that, and then you must click submit, which I'm not going to do. Then if you want to give your team access to other reports, such as the balance sheet or the fund movement summary, like we also showed, that is set at a user role level rather than an individual user level. So you've got this manage user roles button up here, and within here, you can click on each role and you can choose which reports that particular group has access to. You'll note there's no tick boxes for these summary by fund because, as I've already mentioned, that is set on a user level in the user settings that I've just shown to you. And so if we were to tick this balance sheet box, that would mean that all users with the role admin team could now view the balance sheet. And if we did the same for the fund movement summary, it would also give them access to that. And again, we press submit and that will give them access to that. So typically we tend to find that with organizations, the summary by fund report and the fund movement summary are the best reports to share on a monthly basis. You may occasionally wish to share the balance sheet, but unless you have particular concerns about cash levels, as Jack was just mentioning, it perhaps isn't something that you would share, but that's of course up to you. And we actually recommend often that you send links to the reports rather than downloading them as PDFs or CSVs, because as soon as you download them, they can become out of date. So if you say you want to send out the reports up to the 30th of April, if you set the date there and say you want it to be rounded, now, when you copy this link, you might notice in the top that the date actually has appeared there and also the rounding hole has appeared. So that means that if you give this exact link to people in your organization, they will be taken to this report on this date with this rounding ticked. And actually then that means that you send that in an email with a bit of an explanation and they can click on that, and so long as they've been set up as a user, they'll be able to access it. Of course, you can also choose to download them as PDF and CSV, should or one or the other, should that be helpful to you.